The Exodus was never a national escape. It was humanity escaping ego. Family. The book of Exodus is not a history lesson. It is the story of humanity, the story of consciousness, the story of awakening. Religion made it about a literal nation, a literal Pharaoh, literal plagues, a literal sea, and a literal escape. But the ancient writers were encoding the inner journey of every human soul who wakes up from ego, religion, and fear. Exodus is not about Jews leaving Egypt. Exodus is you leaving. Ego, guilt, shame, condemnation, religious bondage, false doctrine, fear-based belief systems, identity amnesia. This is why the story hits every generation, because it is your life written in metaphor. Let's decode it. Israel symbolized humanity, not an ethnic group. Israel in scripture never meant a bloodline. Israel means those who awake, those who wrestle with God consciousness, those who remember identity, those who overcome ego, those who ascend within. Israel means awakened humanity. You are Israel. Egypt is the state of ego bondage. Egypt symbolizes fear, religion, false doctrine, guilt, shame, performance, mindsets that bury identity, spiritual slavery. This is why it's called the house of bondage. Not because of physical chains, but mental chains. Every human begins in Egypt in a state of spiritual sleep. Pharaoh represents the ego, religion, and fear-based doctrine. Pharaoh is not a king. Pharaoh is a consciousness. He represents the part of you that resists awakening, clings to control, fears losing power, suppresses identity, loves tradition, rejects truth, uses guilt and fear to enslave the soul, hides Christ within. Pharaoh is the voice that says, you're just human, you're unworthy, you're guilty, you're condemned. You need religion to save you. You need performance to be acceptable. This is the real oppressor. God hardened Pharaoh's heart is spiritual symbolism. God did not make Pharaoh stubborn to prove a point. The ego hardens itself whenever identity rises. Awakening threatens ego. So ego becomes rigid, defensive, fearful. Pharaoh's hardened heart is the ego resisting the awakening process. This is why people attack awakening messages. Religion fights identity teachings. Fear reacts violently to truth. Doctrine lashes out when exposed. You are watching Pharaoh harden his heart in real time. The plagues are the stages of awakening. The plagues were not supernatural punishments, they were inner disruptions. When awakening begins, the soul experiences discomfort, resistance, confusion, old beliefs collapsing, ego panicking, identity rising, emotional purging. The plagues symbolize the breaking of false identities, the collapse of old programming, the shaking of religion, the exposure of lies, the cleansing of the inner world. Awakening is never smooth. It disrupts everything ego built. This is the true meaning of the plagues. Let my people go is God coming through for humanity. This is the cry of divine consciousness saying, release my children from ego. Release humanity from fear. Release them from religious bondage. Release them from false doctrine. This is not a political statement. It is a cosmic awakening call. God wasn't freeing slaves. God was freeing consciousness. This is why you are seeing a massive awakening on earth today. We are in our generation's exodus. The Red Sea is the final barrier between ego and identity. The Red Sea symbolizes the last fear, the final doubt, the giant ego narrative, the illusion of separation. The sea only parts when identity rises, not before. The moment you step out of ego and into Christ consciousness, the way forward opens. This is why Moses must lead and Pharaoh cannot follow. The sea. Drowning Pharaoh's army is the ego being dissolved by awakening. The army symbolizes all the lies you believed, all the doctrines you inherited, all the fears you carried, all the identities you wore, all the guilt and shame of religion. Calm, peaceful water after the storm, with beautiful golden light reflecting on the surface. The scene is serene and triumphant, representing the peace that comes after ego dissolution. Perhaps gentle waves lapping at shore. The sea, awareness, collapses on them and dissolves them. Awakening destroys ego effortlessly. Your spiritual identity kills your old identity without you lifting a hand. The promised land is awakened. Consciousness. This land is not physical. The promised land is identity restored, union with spirit, freedom from ego, consciousness awakened, Christ within revealed, living from your divine nature. This is why the land was described as flowing, fruitful, abundant, rest-filled. These are not crops. These are states of consciousness. The promised land is not a place. It is a person waking up. The Exodus is your story. You are Israel awakening. Your soul is coming out of Egypt. Your ego is Pharaoh losing power. Your plagues are the cracks in your old identity. Your Red Sea is your final fear dissolving. Your promised land is your true self rising. The Exodus isn't ancient history. It is the human journey, the story of every spirit emerging from ego into identity. This is why the power of scripture is in its symbolism, not literalism. The Bible was never written as a book of history. It is a spiritual manuscript encoded with metaphors, patterns, and inner truths that only the Word Himself can unveil. Christ in you reveals the Word because the Word originated from Him. But many have never awakened to Christ within. They were handed another gospel, a gospel of fear, performance, rituals, and outward behavior. They were told they were saved, yet their consciousness never awakened. Salvation is not performance. Salvation is awakening to the Christ already within you. The gospel religion preaches does not awaken, it sedates. It keeps people spiritually asleep, bound by guilt, shame, fear, and separation. It maintains the illusion of distance instead of revealing oneness. Only the true gospel of Christ awakens. Only the revelation of Christ within breaks the sleep state. This is why He came, and this is why He died. To awaken humanity to their true identity, not to reinforce bondage. The religious leaders killed Christ, the apostles, and anyone who stood for truth. Because religion hates freedom. Religion thrives on control. Ego loves to dominate, to be in power, to dictate, to blind, to enslave consciousness. Christ and His apostles preached liberation, identity, oneness, divine sonship, inner authority, and freedom from fear. Ego cannot stand that. Religion cannot tolerate that. Control cannot coexist with awakening. So the same spirit that opposed Christ then still reacts today against anyone who dares to awaken others to their true identity. This is why awakening changes everything. And this is why the Word is opening itself to you now.